So this story takes place in India about 160, 70 years ago. Now, you may not know, but at that time, India was controlled by uh, the British, by England. And in the India is a pretty interesting country with a variety of kind of climates and terrain. And in the northwestern part of the country is what they call a hill country, and this is rolling hills with forests. They're not evergreen forests like we have in the mountainous west, but they're um, forest of leaf trees, and it's a it's a pretty mild climate with a lot of farming, and the Himalaya mountains rise to the north um, of this area. They rise to the north all across India, but the Himalaya mountains are to the north, and the hill country, as I said, has a pretty nice climate. And anyway, that's where the story takes place. And there was a British outpost in the hill country, and there was a troop or a collection of British soldiers and a few officers who lived there in this outpost. And the outpost was fenced with a wall, not a high wall, because they weren't really under attack very much, but they had whitewashed buildings. Uh, uh, they had some horses, and uh, they had one sort of central building where there were offices and also where the officers got together for tea. And as you may know, tea, afternoon tea, and tea at any time, but afternoon tea is a British custom that even to this day is still held pretty regularly. So it was one afternoon, and there were about four officers having tea in the main administrative building. And they were sitting in chairs around a table, and there was a commanding officer who was in charge, and then there was three lieutenants. One of them was a Scotsman, a man from Scotland, whose name was Russell, and he was at that time he was about 22 years old, and he had just fairly recently come from Scotland. And in Scotland, they do a lot of bird hunting. And he was a hunter, and he loved to hunt. Well, in India, um, there was some bird hunting, but there was also hunting for animals. Um, there's a huge animal called a gaur, huge kind of an antelope animal, and other kinds of antelopes, and he loved to hunt. Anyway, so they're having tea this one afternoon, and there's a commotion outside the room. And one of the soldiers comes in and says, "Sir, there's a villager here to see you," to the commanding officer. And the commanding officer said, "Show him in." And in walked a man who was dressed in a white cotton blouse. He was an Indian. A white cotton blouse. He had black hair and, brown skin, and white cotton pants down to about his ankles, and sandals. And he was pretty dirty and sweat stained. And um, the commander asked him why he was there, and he spoke English, and he said, "There's been a killing at my village, 15 miles away." And the commander said, "A killing?" And he said, "Yes, a tiger killed one of the villagers, and we think it's a man-eater, and we would like you to come and hunt it down. And the commander said, yes, I'll send some elephants immediately. And he said, you wait and you can guide my elephants back to your village. And so the man went out, and Russell immediately said, sir, I request permission to go on this hunt. And the commander looked at him and said, all right, we need permission granted. I'll send 2 elephants, a couple of trackers, and you make sure you take a heavy rifle, and this villager will guide you to the village. And so the next morning, it took them a little while to get everything organized. It was afternoon, so the next morning they left, and each elephant had a mahout, and a mahout is a man who is raised with the elephant from the time it's a baby, sits behind the elephant's head on its neck, and with a long wooden shaft with an iron tip with a hook on the end of it, and that's how they guide the elephant. They don't really jam this tool into the elephant, but they guide him with it and talk to him, and the elephant and the mahout grow up together. So on the back of the elephant is a big pad. These are Indian elephants, remember. Indian elephants can be tamed and are used even to this day for a lot of work. So they can haul big trees out of the forest and so on and so forth. In those days, they were used a lot. So there's a big pad on the elephant's back on which rode Russell and one of the trackers, and the second elephant had the villager and a second tracker. So they took off early in the morning and covered the 15 miles by about noon, showed up at the village, which was not a very big village in the forest, and everybody was in the village. There were maybe 20 houses, small houses, and everybody was in the village. Nobody was out farming. And so the head man of the village came out and guided them about a half a mile out of the village to a place where there was a stream, a small river, where the villagers got water every day. And the elephants walked up, and there on the ground at the edge of the river, they all got off the elephants, and there on the ground at the edge of the river was a big dark spot on the ground. And the head man pointed it out, and the spot was made from blood. And he said one of the women came to get water, and the other women had all got their water for the morning and gone back, and she was a little bit late, and she was alone. And he said, and the trackers looked at the ground, and the trackers pointed out, here's where in the bushes the tiger lay, and the woman passed by, and he got her. And the blood, the big spot on the ground was her blood. And then the tracker said, and here's where he dragged her off. And so they got on the elephants and followed the trail with the trackers. The villagers went back and followed the trail with the trackers through the grass. Now the grass is pretty tall, about 5 feet tall. Now there were farming plots that were cleared, but the tiger didn't go there. The tiger had pulled the body through this 5 foot tall grass, which is why the elephants are so effective, because you're up on top of the elephant, you're way higher than 5 feet, and you can look out and see a tiger or an animal ahead of you in the grass. And so the trackers guided, the tracker and the mahout guided the two elephants. Um, the lead elephant followed the trail, and it wasn't hard to follow. And about a 3/4 of a mile into the grass, they came upon a big matted down area with more blood, bones, and bits of cloth scattered around the ground. And they got off, and the tracker said, "This is where the tiger ate the woman." And um, Russell was questioning uh, why the tiger would go in and kill a woman that never had before at that village. And the tracker said, the trackers are hunters, hunter/tracker. Tracker said, somehow this tiger has been injured and cannot get its normal prey. A tiger doesn't turn Maneater unless it can't get its normal prey. But once it learns how to kill people, the tracker said, a human is the easiest thing in the world. These tigers are enormously strong. One blow of its paw will kill a human or disable them, and then it just kills them with its mouth and teeth. And once they start, they keep killing because people are the easiest thing in the whole forest to kill. So they tracked, with the trackers, they tracked the tiger through the grass into the forest, tracked him all that day, went back to the village, spent the night, came back out, tracked him all the next day, and finally on a rocky ridge, the trackers lost the ability to find the tracks. And so they returned to the British compound. And a week later, one morning, another villager showed up at the compound, and the tiger had struck again, different village. And immediately, Russell got his rifle, and the commander ordered the mahouts to get a couple of elephants, and they went out. This time, it was a farmer, an old man who had stayed late in the afternoon working his ground outside this particular village, and had been coming home in the evening, and the tiger got him from the side of the trail on his way back to the village. They got there, and the trackers, the same thing. Big blood spot on the ground, a drag trail off through the grass, which they followed. About a mile away, they found where the tiger had eaten the body. There were bones scattered around, bits of cloth and stuff. And they followed the tracks for a day, and then a second day, and this time Russell didn't want to give up. And the tracks didn't disappear, so they followed the tracks for a third day and lost them. So back to the British compound. 4 days later, the tiger struck again, different village. Same scenario. This time it was a boy in broad daylight taking food out to his father in the fields. And there was a section of the trail that led out to the fields on either side of which was brush and trees, and the tiger was waiting, got the boy, and dragged it off, dragged the body off. Same deal. They found the blood, they found where the tiger had killed the boy, followed the trail, found where the tiger ate the boy. Same exact thing. Trailed the tiger for 2 days and lost it. The tiger was running ahead, was moving ahead because, the elephants weren't moving fast, but they were moving steadily, and the tiger just outran them and disappeared. They got back to the compound, and Russell went to the commanding officer, and he said, "Sir," he said, "the trackers think the tiger's going to strike again. This business with the elephants, yes, it's safe. Yes, the elephants can see into the high grass, but we got a lot of forest area where there's not high grass. And I think, with your permission, sir, I should take horses the next time. The horses can move a lot faster than elephants, and we can stay closer to the tiger and perhaps corner it somewhere, and I can shoot it." And the commanding officer didn't want to do that, but Russell pressed his case and told him how the tiger just outran him every time. And finally, the commander agreed. 5 days later, another kill at a village, and the villages were in sort of a semicircle around the compound. The tiger didn't strike, had not gone back to the first, second, or third village. It hadn't gone back. It hit a new village each time in sort of a semicircle around, 10, 15 miles away from the compound, from the British compound. Wasn't really a fort. So this time, Russell had made preparations with the horse handlers. He had horses ready to go. The trackers each had a horse. He had a horse. They put the villager who reported the killing on a horse, and they took off right away. And the man had come in the morning, and they were out of there right away. And they got to this village really quickly with the horses. They weren't running the horses, but the horses were faster than the elephants. They got to the village, and again, it was a woman, an old woman, who had been ambushed close to a water source. And same situation. They saw where the tiger had been hiding in the grass and bushes, and got the woman. This time there were a couple other women present, and they fled. When the tiger came out, the tiger didn't come out with a roar or anything, just struck this woman down, and boy, the other women ran for their lives. And the tiger didn't. I gotta kill this phone. The tiger didn't go after them. Dragged the woman off, and same scenario, but with the horses, this time they were much faster. And they got to the feeding site, and they were fast enough to the feeding site that the tracker said the tiger left not long ago. Not long. I mean, the tiger's only maybe an hour ahead of us. And so the horses had really cut down the time. So they pretty quickly were on the trail, and pretty quickly started gaining ground on the tiger. The reason they were gaining ground is that Russell saw a flash of orange and black through the trees as the tiger was now running from them. And they tracked the tiger all that day, and it came to be night, and and they knew they couldn't follow him in the night, and they were kind of they were sort of, they weren't that, the way the tiger had run, they weren't that far from the village. They went back to the village with the horses. They were pretty quick, went back to the village, spent the night, and were back out at the site where they had stopped um, just at dawn. And they tracked the tiger through the hills. And again, the trackers said they were getting close because they could tell by the pug marks, which is the tracks of the tiger, they were getting close. And that afternoon, they came to, in the late afternoon, they came to a big, big ravine in the forest. And they came out on a hillside, and the hill went down, and the bottom of the ravine was filled with brush. And then there was clear hillside across from them, and then forest beyond that. And it was really quiet. And they stood there on the top of the hill looking down. And one of the trackers said, "See that trail? Goes off this hill, and you see that hole in the brush? That's where the trail goes into the brush." And it was starting to get dark, and Russell said, "Is there any break? Can you see any break in the brush that is a separation of brush so that there was a clear area in the ravine?" And one of the trackers said, "Yeah, up to our right, I think there's a space there with grass and no brush." And Russell said, "Do you think you can cross without being, in safety?" And the tracker said, "Yeah, I think I can." So Russell said, go across the ravine up to the hillside and come back to where the trail from the ravine comes up the side of the hill, and see if there are any tracks. And the guy did, and there were no tracks. So they knew the tiger was down in the ravine. And Russell said, "All right, I'm gonna stay here with one of the trackers," and he sent the other tracker back to the village to get food for them. And he said, "We're going to spend the night right here so that we can start first thing in the morning." And so they did. They sent a tracker into the village. He got some food and got some blankets, and they came back and they camped right there at the top of the hill. They wanted the human presence right there. And came light in the morning, and Russell sent the tracker around, across the open area to the top of the hill, across the ravine from them. And it was a big ravine. It was probably, from one hilltop to the other was at least the length of a football field, if not more, 100 yards across. It wasn't narrow. And the tracker got up to the trail coming out of the ravine, and he waved his hand, no pug marks. So they knew the tiger was in the brush. And Russell said, "I'm going after him." And the one tracker who was with him, the other tracker was across the other side of the ravine. The tracker said, you can't do that. It's too dangerous." And Russell said, I'm scared he's going to escape one way or the other. I've got to go in. And the tracker didn't want him to go. The Indian didn't want him to go. But Russell had a heavy rifle, that is heavy caliber rifle. And so he loaded, of course he loaded it, it was loaded. And he starts down the hill on the path. And he comes to this opening in the brush, and the opening is about chest high. And so he has to bend over to walk in. And he starts. And there is no sound in the brush. No sound. And he takes one step. And then another step. And then he feels a presence behind him. And he turns around, and there's his tracker, and he waves him back, and the tracker says no, doesn't say anything, but indicates he's following. And he has an old flintlock, a very, very old-fashioned rifle, probably with nails in it. Not real powerful, but it was a weapon. And probably nails, which is what they did. They put nails down the barrel, tamp it in. It was very, very old-fashioned kind of rifle, but he's staying with Russell. And so they go one step at a time. And it's deathly quiet, and it gets dark because the brush over the top of the ravine is thick, and there's no sound. One step after another. And then they hear the trickle of water. There's a little stream running through the bottom of the ravine. And the trail kind of curves through the brush and then goes to the stream. So they're walking on the trail along the edge of this little stream. And they're going really slow. One step, long pause, and then another step, long pause, brush all around them. And they follow the stream for a few yards, and then there is, to the right, there's some boulders that have fallen down the hillside to the edge of the stream, a sort of a pile of boulders. And so Russell checks the boulders out very carefully. One step, another step, and he gets past the boulders. And for some reason, he turns around and looks up and back to his right. And there, perched on a boulder, is the tiger. And it jumps for him. He swings around and fires, pulls the trigger. He doesn't aim. Can't aim or anything. He swings around and pulls the trigger. There's a deafening explosion, and he goes black. The next thing he knows, the tracker is looking in his face, yelling at him. Can you see me? Can you see me? Wake up. Can you see me? And on part of him is this heavy weight. And finally, he opens his eyes, and the tracker manages to pull him out from under the body of the tiger. And he tries to get up, and his left leg is broken. He can't get up. By now, the second tracker has come down the hill. He heard the explosion, terrified. He was terrified. He didn't dare do anything until the first tracker finally shouted up to him to come down. And what had happened is the tiger sprang at Russell, and Russell only had time, as I said, to swing and pull the trigger. The gun was still in his hands, and pull the trigger, and by great good luck, the bullet went right through the tiger's neck and out its head and killed it instantly. And it fell on him from its jump. And the weight of it, it's heavy, 900 to 1,000 pounds, and it fell on him, or maybe not quite that heavy, but 700 to 900 pounds. It fell on him and broke his leg. So the trackers, got him out from under the tiger. One of them went back to the village. The villagers all came out. They got a litter, which would be sort of like a stretcher arrangement, to carry Russell back to the village. The villagers all came out. They put the tiger, carried the tiger on a big pole with its back legs lashed together on top of the pole, its front legs lashed together on top of it. Went back to the village. They had a huge celebration. Russell was a big hero. They had a huge celebration and thanked him and so on and so forth. Big celebration of killing the Maneater. And they got Russell back to the compound and sent for a doctor. And, a doctor's a long way away, but they sent for a doctor who came and set his leg, and he was completely out of it. And in the sense it was a really bad break. And so he got to go back to New Delhi, which is a big city, and even then was a big city, to recover his broken leg. And 4 months later, he showed up back at the compound. And he walked with a little bit of a limp, but he was able to resume his duties. About 6 weeks after that, he and the other officers and the commander were having tea. In the afternoon, there was a commotion outside the door, and a villager came in and said, "There's been a killing." And before the commander could say anything, Russell raised his arm and said, "Sir, I'm going after the tiger." And that is the end of the story. Now, let's change the end just a little bit, and I'll give you a little break on this one. I'll give you a little break on this one, and not make it impossible. So here's the change in the end of the story, and you guys can write the new ending. So they're approaching the boulders, and they're one step at a time, and they go past the boulders, or they're almost past the boulders when Russell hears a very slight scraping noise to his right. He can't see around the boulders, but to his right and above on the boulders. So now you write the new ending to that story, okay? All right, I'll see you the next time.